What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves, physically, emotionally, and spiritually?
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them, visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies? Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS. Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Kevin Moore Show. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by one of my previous guests, Barrie Giles. Now Barrie is a former member of the Jane Roberts ESP class and was referred to as our poet by Seth in 1972. Now he's published more than 80 poems in various magazines, written over 4,000 plus poems, and is the author of the poetry book Outside is a Secret Key. Now his latest book is Seth Material Q&A, The Spiritual Inner Journey of Self-Awareness. Barrie Giles, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It is great to have you back on. You were part of our Channeling docu-series. Now, in the description below, I'll link your interview on that Channeling docu-series. And really, I did not know I would be having you back on so soon after that Channeling docu-series came out. But, you wanted to come on just to really show some interesting information and some points here, which are all going to be coming up on the screen. We've got lots of information that's going to come up on the screen, Seth quotes, to show that some of the people out there right now that I probably introduced as well to the market, and other people have been around for some time who, say they're channeling the Seth group or Seth or whatever aspect of Seth it may be, where there is documentation that you've pulled from the Seth material to show that, there's many times where it was said that, Seth will only come through Jane Roberts, this particular Seth, Seth as a totality, should I say, will only come through Jane Roberts. And you wanted to come on to sort of, show that, didn't you? I mean, you tell me what.
Yeah, because first of all, nobody's ever really discussed it like we are. Also, when people talk about it, I'm calling them, and I don't know if I mean offense or not, I'm saying the fake Seth people. You could say alternate Seth people, new Seth people. They usually point to just one quote, and which is a pretty good quote, that's in Seth Speaks at the very beginning, and said, well, that's the only thing Seth said, but it wasn't. I sent you 21 quotes. I counted them. And then there's another quote about, I didn't count those quotes, that we're going to go to about this, what you call the Seth group. So all in all, because if there is a Seth group, you have to understand what that would be. And people point to Seth II as like part of that group, but I'll get into all that. So I think it's very important to have this discussion because no one else is. And the people who are doing this really just dismiss what I'm saying. I don't think they have any idea everything Seth said, though.
Okay. And of course, I think there's obviously Rick Stack, one of the other members of the Seth class, because let's just remind the audience, you were there with Jane Roberts in some of her classes.
Yeah, I went for about a year, and Ricky, who you're talking about, was also my friend, and Richard, who recently passed. We were all part of the group called the New York Boys. Sue wrote a book about class, and they called us the New York Boys. I think that was our nickname because all of us were like hippie type people, and there was about 5 to 8 at different times, and we would all travel up to Elmira. It's a 5-hour trip each way. And we would like invade the class because everybody else was basically from the Elmira area. And we were basically different, because we were like New York hippies. But we all fit in well, and everybody did get along, but we were referred to as the New York Boys. So I was one of the New York Boys, as was Ricky, and I call him Dickie, you call him Richard, and other people, Larry Davidson and Bobby Axelrod, and there were others.
And how many of the New York Boys are still with us?
Well, as I said, Richard has just recently passed, Bobby Axelrod within the year, and Larry Davidson. So those are 3 that are definitely not physically with us. Those are the only ones that passed. The other ones, that's me and Ricky and Jeffrey and others. I don't really know the number, but I would say, because some of them were like regulars, and then some would come. There was like what they called the rotating chair, and some people would come into that chair, and some would come. That group might have been about 10. The whole core might have been about 6 altogether or so. I don't have an exact number, though.
Absolutely. And the house in Elmira, hasn't that been appropriated at some point? Isn't the original house where the Seth material was channeled is now under some sort of foundation?
Yeah, the original house, they call it the Seth House. And they it's a nonprofit organization, and they took over the house, and they actually blocked me from their site because they don't agree with this about that Seth could come through anyone. They don't like being challenged. Like a lot of online, not a lot, but too many in my account. Seth people online, authorities in quotes, don't like to be questioned or challenged. In any case, so I can't access their site anymore. But and one of my complaints was they have it kind of like a bed and breakfast type of thing, but they're doing other things with it. So overall, I think it's good they're preserving the house. I don't know what they're doing with it exactly, but you can find them online. It's called the Seth House.
Would you ever go back just to see it?
I've never blocked or banned anyone. I've been blocked and banned. I would go back if they blocked did it. I never block them. They could come to my site or anything whenever they want.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. Okay, and with Rick Stack, do you think he would ever address the questions that you're about to address? Why wouldn't he? Do you think?
I think again, channeling Ricky right now. No, I think Ricky would address it if he was asked. But he's busy with other things. I know that I've been talking with him about it, and he is going to be putting up a bunch of quotes, including, he doesn't even have all that I have. When I last spoke to him, which was just maybe a month ago, I only had about 15 or 16. Now I have 21. So I'm going to re-give him those. And he said he's been compiling his own. So on his site, the Seth Center, I don't know exactly what it's called, he's going to have a page on this. So he's going to address it that way. If ever you interview him again, you should ask him about it.
Now you watched one of the interviews. Maybe a few of them. One of them was with Cass, and one of them was with a mum and daughter group that channels Sethia, a female version of Seth. From Atlanta. I don't know if you ever watched that one, but I know you did watch. Yeah, I know.
I didn't see that.
No,
I had left Atlantis at that time. Atlantia.
Yeah. Well, this Atlantis. Atlantis.
Oh, yeah, I came back to Earth when they were there.
What am I talking about? Yeah, I'm tired, dude. Atlanta. Yeah, sounds the same, don't it? Yeah. So they were from Atlanta, but the woman from Florida, your neck of the woods, Cass. I remember before we did our interview, you did get to. I sent you a clip of her channeling, and you sort of commented on that a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did. But I don't think. But her story was really that as well. That Mark Frost, who channels Seth in California, that he really took her material and run with channeling Seth himself.
Yeah,
And it was really
which
from
is very
her.
bad.
Yeah. But honestly, out of all the people I sort of, I mean, I enjoyed everyone's channel, but this one, particular one with Cass, was pretty deep. Do you know what I mean? And it
Hmm.
just kind of stuck out in my head that
Well,
something
well,
was
you know,
different about it.
yeah. When I say fake Seth or new Seth or alternate Seth, but let's go with fake Seth because that's just the most negative sounding one. I'm not making a comment on the quality of the material. Someone could be a fake Seth using my terms and have material 1,000 times better than Seth. I don't think that would happen because, let's say in theory, if it did, it would still be a fake Seth. It wouldn't be Jane Seth. Uh, so it's not, when I say fake Seth again, I'm not making a comment on the quality, although I have found that it's usually watered down Seth. Or watered down New Age, normal New Age type channeling, or watered down Seth, because Seth is really so far advanced. He said, and I'll get to the quote later on, that his material with Jane is the most pure. He didn't use the word pure. The least distortion that's possible, going from the non-physical to the physical plane. He said there has to be some distortion, but his work with Jane is the least distortion that's possible.
Okay.
Uh,
Absolutely.
you know,
But for example, when Cass is channeling Seth, she's channeling an aspect of the group. It's not. I mean, she made it quite clear. This is not the Jane Roberts Seth. That's another member of the Seth group. This is an aspect of, or another member of the group that's aligned with Cass.
yeah, well, I'm not sure what she's talking about by group. I do address that on part 2 of our interview, where I call it, they say it's a Seth family, it's a Seth, it's not Jane Seth, but it's a relative of Seth or whatever. And they usually talk about Seth 2 when they did it. Like Seth is Seth 1, and then there's Seth 2, and there's 3, 4, and 5, which makes no sense when you understand what Seth 2 is.
Okay. So we're going to break this interview up into 2 parts. For the first part, for those who claim to communicate with the Jane Seth, and for those who claim to communicate, well, the second part for a new evolved or family-related Seth, even invoking Seth 2, as you just mentioned there. So, okay, this is going to be, it's your show in a sense. I wanted to get you on to
Thank you.
to have your say, and I think you've got some interesting quotes here. Do you think, before we start, do you think it's impossible that Seth is more than just the Seth that we understand it to be? That there could be aspects of it out there, and
No. I think Seth is more than we think he is.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's something, one of the things I'm going to mention later on is that Seth, if you believe Seth is a being, a personality, or whatever, he has free will. If he says he's not going to do it, it's not like, well, I'm an open book and anybody could do it. I said nobody, but it's really everybody. I mean, it's not like they kind of treat Seth as if he's just this vibration without a personality or free will attached to it. And we'll go into it though as I read. But so if you're ready for me to, please interrupt whenever and ask all questions.
Yep. No. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to start, and okay, so I'll be reading it and maybe looking up a little if I remember. So it goes, first, who is Seth? Seth is a non-physical entity or personality who was channeled through the trance medium Jane Roberts from 1963 to her death in 1984. She dictated her books to her husband Rob, who transcribed them in longhand before typing them up. John Climo, in his book Channeling, credits Seth as ushering in the modern New Age movement, introducing concepts like you create your own reality, simultaneous time, you're as dead right now as you'll ever be, and much more. In short, Seth's concepts empower each person to find their own answers while becoming accountable in a loving way for their own lives while helping and not harming others. To me, that's the summary of the Seth material. After Jane died in 1984, a growing number of people started to claim that Seth now communicates through them in one way or another. This may seem logical and innocent, but it is not logical, and often may not be so innocent either. Also, it contradicts everything Seth, Jane, and Rob said on the subject. It seems like those who now claim to communicate for Seth have never actually read what Seth, Jane, and Rob said about how Seth would only communicate through Jane in order to maintain the integrity and authenticity of the material. Please note that Seth calls Jane Rupert and her husband Rob Joseph, for he says that these are their entity names and best represent all of their incarnations. So I'll go to the quote now. Quote, Seth, Rupert, louder, he says this, Rupert will present my material for me. Seth, my friend here, Rupert, is my mouth and speaks for me. I will never speak through anyone other than Rupert, simply because there must never be any doubt of the origin of the Seth material, end quote. This is me speaking again. This next quote is the only one that most people talk about because it is written in the beginning of Seth Speaks. And they say this is the only time Seth mentioned it, which is obviously not the case. Okay, quote, Seth, my communications will come exclusively through Jane at all times to protect the integrity of the material, end quote. This is why I am doing this interview, to give everyone the opportunity to see for themselves directly what Jane and Seth actually said about communicating solely through Jane and why. And then we can discuss it. This type of in-depth discussion has never occurred. And for the sake of the Seth material, this issue must be addressed head on. Most people don't even realize that Seth said he could not even give the material if it were not for Jane and Rob together. Seth quote, Joseph, your part in these sessions is extremely important. Without your participation, they could not have begun, nor could they continue. Because of our past alliances, the three of us are closely bound together. However, I need the two of you in order to come through at all. Seth, Rupert and myself are offshoots of the same entity. And now, my dear patient Joseph, may I tell you that you are also part of that same entity. And this is one of the reasons why I am able to communicate with you both. Seth, Rupert will present my material for me. It is largely disregarded, the sort of personality which is required in this endeavor. It simply happens that because of past relationships, I know Rupert well, and Rupert knows me far better than he imagines. He knows well who I am, and I know who he is. Nor should Joseph's part in this endeavor be forgotten. It is more complicated than you may suppose. Now, I have trained Rupert and taught Rupert so that his valid clairvoyant experiences can be put on some sort of scientific basis. He is an intelligent and intuitional personality and should be given credit, end quote.
And just remind the audience here, Rupert is, just so that we're clear.
Sure. Rupert is Jane, and he calls her he. He says overall her entity would be like a male personality.
From a previous life.
From all the other lives.
All the other lives.
I imagine futures and previous, although they did say that this was her last incarnation. But he says Rupert, and he says he, but he's talking about Jane, who's a she. So Rupert is Jane. And to continue, I was going to actually make that point. So we both had the same thought. So to continue, it must be said that many folks who claim to channel Seth may have ulterior motives. They are known to charge hundreds of dollars for short personal sessions with their Seth. They also charge hefty fees for their Seth presentations and selling their Seth books. How would Jane feel about this? Well, when she was alive, she was clearly upset and outraged about the fake Seths of her day, and also about how her readers could so easily accept them. So I assume that she would be equally upset today. This is what she said back in 1982. So, quote, this is Jane. And very troublesome to me came the repeated news that various people were speaking for Seth publicly and charging hefty enough fees. I felt that my work was being contaminated, and more, I was annoyed and disappointed by those readers who could apparently be so taken in by those other Seths. As he has said so many times, Seth speaks only through me to protect the integrity of the material. And it is indeed that contract between him and me that always assures you of the authenticity of Seth's work. I'm deeply outraged that some people who consider themselves followers of mine or Seth can so easily fool themselves when they claim to be speaking for Seth, be so blind to their own motives, or not recognize the fact that they're taking advantage of people. They're also using my work to validate their own, end quote.
And that was from Essays 514 of 82.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have the quotes. I'm not reading them because they interfere too much, but
Sure.
That's from a book called Dreams, Evolution, and Value Fulfillment, and it's an essay from that book dated 1982, April 82.
Do you remember, Barrie, any of the people that were sort of saying they were channeling Seth back when Jane was alive? Can you remember? No, but there must have been.
I had no idea. Jane, they wrote to Jane, but remember back then, in the 70s, even in the 80s, up to the mid 80s and earlier, there was no internet. So
Sure.
I wouldn't know it. They wouldn't be on TV.
No.
They couldn't post it.
No.
They could only, I guess if they put out a book, but I didn't know about that.
Okay.
In class, I don't remember Jane ever talking about it.
No, well, this was 82, wasn't it? So this would have been a bit later.
Well, this was 82, but the other quotes that I read you were from some of them from 64. Another one is 64. One is 1970. So they're not in chronological order, which I had them in at first, but then I wanted them to fit into the essay, my essay, so I changed them. So I could read the date if you want.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. But as a general gist, they were they were before that, and that's interesting in its own right as well. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And what I'm going to say later on is that there was no Seth before Jane. Only as after Jane made the name popular, suddenly all the Seths started sprouting up. In any case, so I'm going to continue. I said, and so getting back to Jane's quote, so you can see here and much more later on that Seth and Jane outright and clearly said that Seth would only communicate via Jane in order to maintain and protect the integrity and authenticity of the material. Seth has also said that he would never open up the material to possibilities of great distortions. Seth, this is 1969. Now, when you see what Rupert can do occasionally and the troubles I can have with distortion, then you can be sure that I would not double or triple the chances for distortion by attempting to speak through anyone else. There's also something else that's Rupert, that he seems to have forgotten, that your relationships, yours, Rob's, and Rupert's, and the relationship between us in the past do much to make our communications possible. He keeps on saying how he really needed not only Jane, but Rob to come through and to come through so clearly, that they have a connection. They're all part of the same entity. So I'm going to continue then with my section. He, Seth, pointed out that those who believe he is communicating via them, including in the dream state, use him as a symbol for their own inner voice or inner communication, but that it would not be him. And like with beliefs, when a symbol is not recognized as a symbol, it is seen as a fact. Seth, this is from the Seth class, 1974. Class member asked, Seth, would you help me in my dreams if I tried to contact you? Seth responds, you help yourself in your own dreams. You do not need me. You may use the symbol of me, but when you do, it is a symbol of your own inner knowledge. For I am the symbol of the knowledge that dwells within each of your psyches. I am myself, but beyond that, I am the symbol of the knowledge that dwells within each of your psyches. End quote. Seth said that all these people can use him as a symbol to find and develop their own inner voice and psychic abilities. He said he didn't mind that. Here's Jane, 1970. Mrs. Bryan had a terrific headache while reading the article about Seth. Suddenly, she thought she felt Seth's presence. An inner voice, presumably Seth's, told her that she had been feeling sorry for herself, that she must stop brooding over her health at once, get up and go out for a walk, and so she would improve at once. We asked Seth about the incident. In this case, he said, Mrs. Bryan had used him as a symbol of her inner self, or superconsciousness, to deliver help and healing influences as well as advice. The experience helped the woman to use her own abilities, and the idea of Seth enabled her to activate her own healing forces. And here's Seth, 1973. If you are quick, and if you are intuitive, and if you are courageous, and if some evening you listen to my voice in the proper mood, then you can follow yourself to the heart of yourself using my voice, using the voice as a road or a vehicle. And this is Rob, 82. Even in God of Jane, which was published in 1981, Jane presented some relatively late material from Seth to show that he doesn't independently communicate with others. The idea that he'd done so can be inspiring. Seth stated, now, I did not communicate with those women, but their belief in me helped each of them use certain abilities, end quote. So, this is me again. What is meant by maintaining the integrity and authenticity of the material? And Kevin, I'm going to be using you as an example here. Kevin, you post online, tweet, and email people. Imagine if 5 to 20 people went online right now claiming to be you, Kevin, using your name, picture, tweet, and email, all writing different opinions, feelings, and philosophies in your name. Some you may agree with, others you may fully disagree with, and even find repugnant, cruel, and ignorant, saying things you would never say. Where is the real you in all of this? You have lost the integrity and authenticity of your words. They have been fully compromised. So you can imagine how confusing and upsetting this could be even at this point. Then, eventually, all of your real posts, along with the posts of all the ongoing fake Kevins, alternate Kevins, etc., all the Kevins would all be mixed together in a contradictory stew of you, contaminating the context, integrity, and authenticity of your actual words and ideas. Eventually, anyone seeing a post from Kevin would ignore them knowing how much you contradict yourself. You say cruel and shallow things one day, and the next you may be wise and kind, but taking contradictory positions with each post. And on top of all this, Kevin, what would you do if you knew that this could or was happening to you? Wouldn't you want to maintain the integrity and authenticity of your words? Perhaps you'd complain about it and say that you would only use a particular IP address or whatever. You certainly would not want people dismissing you at the sight of your name and say, hey, did you see what Kevin said? The opposite of last week. And all the while, you, Kevin, never said anything at all, or would never say whatever they said in the first place. And then suppose that people started to claim that you, Kevin, changed your mind and now welcome everybody to write in your name, that you don't care anymore about your own authenticity, and integrity. How would you feel about this? All of those together. Well, that's what's happening with Seth and Jane. That whole scenario is what's happening right now. If you think of Seth as a being, as a personality, like you are as a person. Today, the theory goes that Seth so much wants to give more linear years of material that he no longer cares about compromising it. Now that Jane died, he no longer cares about compromising it. But rather, he would now come through anyone who asks instead of no one else. Suddenly, he no longer cares about contaminating his own material while opening it up to great distortion. And to avoid distortion was very important to Seth. He went out of his way to say that even with his best efforts, Rob's and Jane's best efforts, all of them, distortion still must exist in the process of giving non-physical material to the physical plane. But he went out of his way to make his material, quote, more valid than any material possible. And he wanted to keep it that way. Here's a quote, Seth's session. This material, with all my best efforts, and with yours, Rob and Jane, of necessity, must contain distortions merely in order to make itself exist at all on your plane. Any material to exist on your plane must be somewhat distorted. I must use phrases with which your minds are somewhat familiar. If I did not take advantage of your own camouflage system, that's physical reality, then you would not be able to understand the material. Inner data must make its entry through some distortion. This material is more valid than any material possible on your plane. That means on Earth, on physical reality. End quote. Why would Seth give this up and contaminate his work with weaker material ripe for great distortions? So far, at best, the so-called new material is just watered-down Seth, or run-of-the-mill New Age comments. So what's the payoff for Seth? Why would he no longer care about contaminating his material after Jane's death, at a time when he would no longer be able to speak up and say, no, it is not me? And do you realize that each person now and then who has ever claimed to communicate for Seth by speaking, automatic writing, in dreams, or whatever, each person has always sworn that they were correct, and each had their own unique, foolproof explanations as to why they were correct. Some have quibbled with the word speak through Seth in order to prove their Seth is real by saying, well, I don't speak through Seth, we meet in dreams, or through automatic writing. Okay, quote, Jane, several people have told me that Seth communicated with them through automatic writing, but Seth denies any such contacts, saying that his communications will be limited to his work with me in order that the integrity of the Seth material be preserved. Seth. A woman wrote that she was involved with correspondences in which I was communicating, I is Seth, in which I was communicating with her, and she was certain that this would prove beyond a doubt my own independent nature, since I, meaning Seth, would have given messages to another medium besides Rupert. The woman was quite convinced of that. Other people have written that I, Seth, have given them such messages. Another woman dreamed of me and had an experience in which a child was definitely healed. Now, I did not communicate with those women, but their belief in me helped each of them use certain abilities. One woman has done some writing, not very good, but still, those abilities came to the fore. The other woman was able to use her own healing abilities. End quote. Yet, each and every person who swore directly to Jane that they were communicating with Seth was told by Seth that they were wrong. Each one of them was sure, just like today, and all with no proof other than their own say-so. Jane, a man in contact with Seth wanted to inform me that I had distorted Seth's material on Christ, and that Seth had told him so. Good Christ, that's Jane speaking. I muttered irritably to Rob when I read the letter. What about the other two people who wrote last year, each with their own versions of Christ's life, each contradicting the other, and each supposedly containing corrections from Seth? I'd written the man a brief note explaining that he was free to believe what he wanted about Christ's life, that he wasn't in contact with Seth, but with his own symbolized version of who or what he thought Seth was. End quote. This is me again. They all say that their own thoughts or inner voice tells them that this is Seth, or that they're picking up on Seth's vibration. It must be remembered that just because someone subjectively believes they are picking up on a vibration or whatever does not make it so. It means they are communicating with what they subjectively believe to be Seth or a vibration connected to Seth. Beliefs not seen as beliefs are seen as facts. Besides, Seth is not simply a vibration to be picked up. He is a conscious personality with free will who can choose things and make decisions. He is not some passive open book for anybody to write in. The next question I believe you should ask yourself for this discussion is, do you believe that Seth is a personality, entity, or whatever who has his own mind, will, and desire? If you have read the books, then you will know that he has repeatedly demonstrated his will throughout the books. He has often instructed or interjected that Jane take a break. When asked a question, he has often chosen to discuss it later in the book or not answer it at all for now. And I'm adding this now here in Seth's class, the same thing. Seth would say, okay, I'll take a question now. I'll discuss that later. He obviously had free will and his own opinions and everything else. Okay, I'm now continuing. Okay. Do you believe that Seth had no control over who he communicates through? That he is something that is just there? Well, I would disagree, because Seth was or is a being, a personality that made choices. And he said that he chooses to communicate only via Jane, and he explained why. If you do believe that Seth had his own mind, then what motivates you not to take Seth at his word? It is not a complicated metaphysical concept. It is simply that he didn't want his material compromised or greatly distorted, as with the Kevin example I gave, by many people claiming now, as then, to speak for Seth, in a sense stealing his identity. And yes, mysteriously, of course, no one channeled to Seth before Jane made the name popular. If Seth was simply always around, using the name Seth, then where is the evidence for that? Where is the evidence for Seth just being there for the asking in the dream state or trance state, in automatic writing, or whatever? If he would communicate through just anyone who asked, then where was he in 1955 to 1963? What about 1927 to 1946? Why isn't Seth speaking all over the place, all the time, for the whole 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries, and so on? Where is the evidence? Rob, this next quote, Rob, how come those other people made their Seths known after Jane began to speak for her Seth and to publish the Jane Seth material? Being inspired to use one's own abilities is a perfectly understandable development that we can be very happy about. But to claim to speak for Jane Seth is quite another thing. End quote. Instead of just taking Seth at face value and on his say-so, Jane and Rob did years of experiments and tests in order to validate and prove to themselves that Seth was who he said he was. They chose to investigate for years. Was it Jane's subconscious? Was she mentally ill? They wrote psychiatrists and conducted years of experiments to test Seth. These can be found in the 9-volume early session books in detail written from 1963 to 1970. Nowadays, folks just claim that they communicate for Seth, and their proof is that they say so. I say to these new Seth people that just because you believe something is happening inside you doesn't make it so. Symbols are often involved, as including in the dream state. And symbols not seen as symbols are seen as facts. So I'll put my money on Seth as their symbol. Seth quote. It is quite natural that others who are experimenting should go through a stage in which it seems to them they are receiving information from me. Suggestion operates, and any trance deeper than ordinary for them can be interpreted in these terms. End quote. But just think, if what they all say is true, then everything Seth said about not communicating via others was false, was wrong, or mistaken. Did Seth just lie? Did he just change his mind after Jane died and said, never mind? Meaning that he went from saying that he was communicating via no one but Jane to saying he would communicate via anyone who asks, no longer caring about the integrity of the material. Rob, next quote is Rob. After all, if he does come through others, or can if he wants to, why hasn't Seth simply said so? And repeatedly in the books, as we've published them over the years, we'd have respected his statements on that aspect of his abilities and intents as much as we did and do on any other. To have attempted to censor Seth since 1963, to keep him to ourselves on that particular subject, would have long ago turned into an impossibly complicated and dishonest task. Jane and I would have become involved in a constant distortion of his material as we rewrote all the sessions. Such a procedure would have turned into a creative tragedy for us and for our readers. End quote. And all of this supposedly happened in 1 or 2 Earth years after Jane's passing. And again, with what payoff? He would now rather come through anyone who tries to contact him on their say-so, with mostly watered-down material ripe for distortion. Next quote. This is a friend from Seth book wrote me, and this is what he said, and I liked it, so I'm using it here. Van Clayton Powell. The argument that Seth had changed his mind after speaking through others doesn't hold water when we remember that Seth exists in a timeless place where he is aware of past, present, and future probabilities. The passage of Earth years means nothing to him, so he would have known of the probability that others would claim to speak for him after Jane passed, and that makes his repeated statements that he would only ever speak through Jane even more powerful. End quote. It seems to me that these new Seth folks choose to ignore, just don't believe, or don't want to see what Seth and Jane actually said about only communicating via Jane. So that they do this so that they can claim that Seth would never stop talking to people, and that he is now communicating through them, and often for a profit. As I see it today, as before her death, Jane would feel the exact way about all of these fake and new Seth folks who claim to communicate for Seth in a trance, in the dream state, or by automatic writing, or whatever, except that now she can't speak out about it herself. Some even go so far as to argue that if you take Seth at his word and believe that he would only communicate via Jane, then you believe that Seth is dead and gone, that he died with Jane. That is a red herring. He never said that he would be dead and gone. Does anyone sincerely believe that any Seth reader would think that Seth is dead because he would only speak through Jane? Why can't or won't folks simply take Seth and Jane at their word, accept their clear-cut, reasonable, logical, and obvious statements? Remove the profit motive, and it may be that people have such strong needs for Seth that they believe he would even go back on his own word just for them, compromise his material just for them. And instead of only communicating via Jane, he would come through 10, 20, or 30 other people just for them. Seth, 1977. Many of the people who read my books realize that the authorities know far less than they originally supposed. They are afraid, however, of going out on their own, so to speak. They do not trust themselves. They do not have the stamina or the resoluteness, however. They no longer trust religion or science in organizational terms. They must accept the fact that Rupert will dare to follow the dictates of the inner self, and this makes the entire affair more frightening to them. And since they distrust themselves, they cannot really understand how the two of you, that's Jane and Rob, trust yourselves as much as you do. They use my position as a substitute for the authority they are trying to give up. They think if I had a Seth, I too would progress. And back to me. Oh, end quote. Okay, Seth. I mean me, I'm speaking, but Seth also said that we all have a Seth inside us. He didn't mean we have Seth inside us, but we all have our own inner voice, inner self, or entity connected to us, as Seth is connected to Jane and Rob. Quote, Seth. Seth Speaks, that's his book. Seth Speaks should be called You Speak and You Speak and You Speak. So listen to yourselves. Nowadays, with Jane having moved on, anyone can claim they communicate for Seth. And a great many New Age folks, including Seth readers, just jump aboard. They may feel a powerful lack in their lives, and they believe only a Seth can fill it. And some may do it for profit, cashing in on Seth's name, and cashing in on the need so many still feel to have a Seth in their lives. Quote, Seth. People become frightened sometimes. They want to think that I spring automatically into your lives as Superman. They did not question Superman. Only a simple change of clothing was required for our hero, Mr. Kent. They do not want Rupert's inquiring mind to intrude. What comic book reader wants to bother with a Clark Kent? Such people simply want Superman to perform his miracles. They do not want my authority questioned. They think that if they had their own super soul, they would use me as if I were a magic genie. They are afraid Rupert might question me out of existence. End quote. Okay, this includes part one of my comments, except I wanted to summarize. Does anyone really believe, after hearing all that Seth and Jane said about only communicating via Jane, all that Seth said about only communicating via Jane, that he would simply change his mind after Jane's death and compromise his material by not communicating through anyone who asks? Okay, that's the first part. Okay, this is part two of the interview, and it goes something like this. No, there is a group of fake Seth, new Seth, or alternate Seth people who claim to communicate not for Jane's Seth, but for a Seth who is from a Seth family. They misunderstand or misinterpret Seth II as simply a relative of Seth, like a sibling or a cousin. Likewise, they misunderstand the phrase, "we are Seth." Briefly, Seth II is to Seth as Seth is to us. Much more on that later. Jane has also referred to Seth II as Seth's entity. These fake Seth folks are either innocently ignorant, dispensing misinformation, or manipulatively lying in order to cash in on Seth's name and or to feed their ego while feeding their bank account. Whatever it is, they push the idea that people can still communicate with or for this new version or relative of Seth if they really want to, just for the asking, with the caveat that this is not Jane's Seth, but an evolved Seth since Jane died, or a relative of Seth that they tie into Seth II, or Seth group. Yeah, as I said, I'm calling it a Seth family here, but a Seth group member. But these people totally get Seth II all wrong. They think of Jane's Seth as Seth I, then claim that Seth II is the next Pierce Seth teacher around for the asking. And this implies that there are many other Seths, Seth 3 and 4, and so on, and all available to meet with anyone upon request, and all are called Seth, of course. Upon simply reading this, it may sound reasonable and logical, but it is far from both. In fact, it actually makes no sense. As an analogy, it's like saying that if there is a magnitude 1 earthquake, then the next earthquake to follow is a magnitude 2, and the next one is a magnitude. The next ones are magnitude 3, 4, 5, and 6, as if the Richter scale was just a chronological ordering of earthquakes. That same magnitude of error is made with Seth and Seth II. Seth II is not just another Seth teacher or the next Seth teacher, in the way that a magnitude 2 earthquake is not just the next earthquake after a magnitude 1 earthquake. Seth II did not simply interact with Jane like Seth did. Seth II is totally incomprehensible to us, and he, she, or it itself has said, and I'll get into that in a minute. I just want to say Seth II would be part of, as my understanding, as the Seth family, the Seth group, is what people refer to, or the we, when Seth II says we are this and we did that. But let me not interrupt myself. Seth II is totally incomprehensible to us, as he, she, or it itself has said. Okay, Seth quote. Well, Seth II now. Our existence is such that communication must be made by others to you. Verbal symbols have no meaning for us. Our experience is not translatable. We perceive your thoughts as lights. Seth II. We move through systems such as yours, that means physical reality. We move through systems such as yours faster than the speed of light. And so, what I am saying is already a translation, and, in your terms, a message left in the past of your time. Seth II. We are involved in forming creations, realities, consciousness. That's forming consciousness, worlds beyond your comprehension. Within these, Seth, as you know him, is a shadow within my awareness. We do not deal with sensory data as you know it. We form the realities. We give birth to universes, end quote. So you can see that no one can simply claim that they are now communicating with Seth II or Seth's entity. Some claim that Seth has morphed or evolved into something or someone else after Jane's death in 1984. And so that cancels out all that Seth and Jane said previously. They say that Seth has changed so much in the last 36 linear years since Jane's death that he is no longer the Seth that Jane knew, and apparently no longer cares about the integrity and authenticity of the material. Tell me, did Seth change or evolve in 1984, right after Jane died? Or was it in 1985, a year after Jane's passing? Or was it at some point in the 36 linear years since she died? Does anyone really believe that Seth, who has been around for ages, has now evolved or expanded within 36 Earth years? And somehow, each of these fake or new Seth folks are privy to this information, with no evidence given, of course, except their own say-so. And some of these folks believe that Seth II is one of these newly evolved Seths, the one that comes after Seth I. Unfortunately, these folks have no idea who or what Seth II is. For example, Seth II has never been physical and can barely stay close to the physical realm, so to speak. Here's Seth II. I come to you from a dimension which you neither know nor understand, and yet that dimension is a portion of all reality. I cannot see your own camouflage structures clearly. That's physical reality, objects, us. I cannot see your own camouflage structures clearly. I cannot perceive time as it appears to you. I can only, to some extent, communicate at this channel. That's via Seth. And this is the use of the word channel, by the way, in 1968. I can only, to some extent, communicate at this channel. I can impart information that is not distorted in three-dimensional terms, simply because I am so apart from three-dimensional reality. On many occasions, I transmit information to your Seth, and he then gives it to you, end quote. So, Seth is not simply a Seth, but he also acts as a medium, so to speak, giving Seth II information to Jane, as well as his own information to Jane. Here is Seth. He, quote, this is the next quote, he, Seth II, knows a portion of him is filtering down into this room. And in his own way, he is aware of you and of the room. Now, when the sun shines and the rays fall from the sun down through your solar system, the sun is not consciously aware of its rays, nor of the rooms that these rays may illuminate. This other personality, that's how they referred to Seth II at the time, this other personality is aware that a part of himself is filtering down. And in his own way, he is aware of you and of the room. But he is not aware of you as you know yourselves. And he is scarcely aware of me as I know myself. He is aware of me, that Seth II is aware of me, but in another context and in another dimension of existence, end quote. So obviously, Seth II is not simply just Seth's cousin or sibling or group member, but rather Seth II is so advanced that he is scarcely aware of Seth. And Jane couldn't communicate with him or her on her own. First, she couldn't go far enough to meet Seth II. She needed Seth as a translator or intermediary in order to meet him halfway, so to speak. Then, two, even if she could get close to Seth II, she wouldn't be able to understand him anyway. Quote, Seth II, I have not traveled where you are, and yet a portion of me that you know is Seth has so traveled. I am more divorced from you than he is. There is more effort involved in these communications, for Rupert must come farther since I cannot come closer. I'm just going to stop here for my own notes. I want to say, notice he goes, Seth, I have not traveled where you are, and yet a portion of me that you know is Seth has so traveled. A portion of them. So where Seth is coming from is this Seth II amazing thing that we're now discussing. It's not like there's a bunch that they just send out, and you'll see later on that it's Seth, not other. There's no other ones. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Rupert must come farther since I cannot come closer, end quote. So, this is me again. So, Seth had to translate Seth II for Jane to even understand Seth II, because Seth II is so removed from human existence. Jane couldn't even reach Seth II, and allegedly now, everyone for the asking can, as well as a Seth 3 or 4, etc. Seth II. I have not been a personality acquainted with your reality, that's physical reality, or with your system, or with your dimension. Seth, however, has. He is therefore in a position to translate the information which I then impart. I am not, in your terms, male or female. These are designations that are used within your system. Seth tells me that it is difficult for you to understand this particular point. What you experience as emotion, I experience in a sort of mathematical intensity and translate. Seth II. This is Seth, talking about Seth II now. That was Seth II. Here's Seth. What Seth II is cannot be translated in your terms. His thoughts are not translated because you cannot rightfully call them thoughts. A thought to him is a creative experience. What he thinks immediately is, end quote. In other words, Seth II is so beyond the concept of thoughts because whatever he thinks is instantly created and are no longer actually thoughts, and no longer are thoughts involved at all, nor ever have been. Rather, they are realities or experiences, like immediate realities or experiences, not thoughts. There is no physical reality to act as a middleman, giving linear time between the thought and its physicalization. So, all in all, Seth II could not simply in any way interact with Jane. Seth had to meet Seth II halfway and then translate Seth II so that Jane could even understand anything he had to say. Seth himself even had trouble understanding Seth II. And I'm going to take my water at this suspenseful time.
You know, what's interesting here is that obviously, Seth gave, how many books did Seth bring through Jane in the end, in a sort of rough total? How many was it?
Well, in a rough total, there were the official books that Seth dictated to Seth, and I forget how many that is. Let's say 10. I don't know. Then there are what they call the personal sessions, because in the sessions that Seth gave for the book, the information and stuff was not part of the book dictation. So those were taken out and then put together relatively recently. They were called the deleted sessions. Now they call them the personal sessions. And then before Seth Speaks, which was Seth's first book, let's say that began as session 501, there was session 1 to 500, and those all came out as the 9-session early session books. So and those are all the Seth material. And then there are the Seth transcripts, the transcripts of the Seth classes. And so far there are four books of those, and those only go up to like 72, I think, and then the other ones haven't come out yet. So all in all, I'd say there's about 30.
Okay.
And when you put all of that together.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, why wouldn't we have been ready for more beyond the 32 in a decade to come?
We are ready for more, but it's not Seth giving it. Seth gave more. If Jane lived to, let's say, 100, she was still alive now, I imagine he'd still be giving out great, undistorted material on new things, different things, expanding on things. Seth didn't finish because he ran out of his material to give, or there's nothing more for us to know from him, but he was going to only do it through Jane.
But aren't we losing out? Aren't we losing out then? If Jane's left early, then where's...
No, well, who cares? First of all, I don't believe we're losing out because, first, we have everything inside us anyway. Two, there are other mediums out there. There are other people like Elias, people like, I'm not making judgments on these people now, but they like Elias. They like, I forget the guy's name now. I think Daryl does him. Daryl Anchor, the guy
Daryl Anchor that channels Bashar, yeah.
Yeah, so there's Bashar, there's a lot, and there's Emmanuel. So all these people and personalities are still out there giving information. So it's not like, the faucet's off and now we're all like in some twilight zone where there's no more information. We're closed off now from the inner world, and we will soon die in ignorance as life continues over the centuries. Everything's still around. The only thing is that Seth, he knew she was going to die. He could have said, and after Jane dies, I am going to then come through other people, because what I have to say, even though I told you it's going to be greatly distorted, and even though I said I don't want my material contaminated, I don't want the integrity lost or the authenticity lost, and I don't want distortions, yet I am going to come through somebody, because you so need even a weak, distorted me to speak. And Seth he addressed that earlier on in one of the quotes about Clark Kent, how people don't like Clark Kent. They just want to hear from Superman. And all he has to do is go into a phone booth. They just want their own, Seth. But in any case, if you want, I could continue.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say this. I think the material is some of the best material out there, the Seth stuff. It really is. It affected so many people's lives. It still does.
Oh, yeah. And it's to me, the quality of the material is just better by leaps than all other material. The depth he goes into, the details, the humanness, even though he can go into these quantum type ideas, he explains, like, he doesn't just say, oh, you create the objects. He explains how the thoughts become the objects. He goes into, I don't know if we want to call it scientific, but quantum scientific type explanations of things. He doesn't just no one else does that. No one else speaks also as humanly, poetically, deeply, but there's still, valuable things. And of course, everybody clicks. Oh, Abraham's one of the other people. People click, with someone. Someone could click with Abraham and not click with Seth, and that's their business. So it's not that these channels are still around. But Seth said, I'm not going to compromise my material. So you can get some watered down me because somehow you think I'm special. And I'm going to do this all for you. I'm going to change everything I said because Henry out in Iowa wants me around. All right. So I'm going to continue again unless you want to. Okay, I'm going to go back to the last thing I said and then lead into the quote I was up to. So I left off saying, so all in all, Seth II could not simply in any way interact with Jane. Seth had to meet Seth II halfway and then translate Seth II so that Jane could even understand anything he had to say. Seth himself even had trouble understanding Seth II. Quote, Seth, unfortunately, your world would fit in one of his Saturday afternoons if he knew what a Saturday afternoon was. However, his energy is beyond my knowledge, and his creativity is beyond my knowledge. This is Seth speaking. His energy is beyond my knowledge, and his creativity is beyond my knowledge. I will not grow into what he is. We have our own ways to follow. I have always dealt with emotions, but he deals with those realities that make emotions possible, end quote. So, if there is a Seth III, and there probably is, it would probably be almost impossible for Seth II to understand him. For Seth III would be even that much more distant and impossible to understand as Seth II was for Seth. And this is how difficult and distant Seth II was. Quote, this is Seth II. To me, your universe is perhaps as a star might appear to you. I do not perceive it clearly, but when I focus upon it, then I can perceive your psychic reality and your individual intensities. I transmit information to Seth, who then interprets it for Rupert. The information that I have would not be understandable to you in my terms, and therefore must be interpreted and translated. Seth II, you do not understand multidimensional personality structures. And this is, I'm going to interrupt now. This is where the group Seth thing, you coming in, the Seth pyramid gestalts, whatever. They have all different names for it. Seth family, cousins of Seth. Anyway, Seth II. You do not understand multidimensional personality structures. This does not mean they do not exist. It is true that our reality cannot be translated in your emotional terms. Emotions, as you know them, represent but the smallest glimmerings of our reality. We have always watched. We are the watchers and the protectors, and you have never been alone. We tend you carefully. That's tend, T-E-N-D. Oh, you see it there. We tend you carefully as a gardener tends his beloved plants. We are concerned over your growth and your nourishment, end quote. So, Seth II, so the number 2 of Seth II is not just a number like that of equal Seths on a baseball team. Seth 1 is the pitcher, Seth 2 is the catcher, and so forth, with Seth 9 in right field. So clearly, Seth 2 is not just another Seth in the Seth family of equal Seths that we all can just communicate with or for or learn from in the dream, trance, or some other alternate state. Seth 2 is ancient beyond infinity. Seth 2, or him or we, have taught the human race how to create physical reality in the first place, how to create physical objects, and so forth. Seth 2 is not simply another Seth teacher or peer. Quote, Seth 2, we want you to realize that there is consciousness without form, that there is consciousness with will and vitality that comes to you from beyond even those places that your Seth knows. We want you to realize that though it is hard for us to communicate, we spoke with your race before your race learned language. We gave you mental images, and upon these images, you learned to form the world that you know. We gave you the pattern by which your physical selves are formed. We gave you the pattern by which you learn to form your physical reality. We gave you the pattern, intricate and involved and blessed, from which you form the reality of each physical thing you know. We gave you the pattern upon which you formed your entire physical universe and the comprehension that exists within each cell, the knowledge that each cell has, the desire for organization was given by us. The entire web work was initiated by us. We taught you to form the reality that you know, end quote. So Seth II taught or gave us the patterns of consciousness so that we could form the reality we know and the entire physical universe in the first place. But he is not a part of our reality at all. From the Seth II point of view, he understands that all of our physical universe is like a fantasy that we see as one indivisible reality. He is not a being, creature, or entity that visits us in dreams. Seth II. Our perception allows us to tune into the particular fantasies that you perceive as one indivisible reality. We can perceive it, but we cannot participate. We only observe that which, in your terms, eons ago we helped create. End quote. About the term we, it is absolutely nothing like the super simplified version of we that we as humans routinely use. Like in the song, We Are Family. We can't grasp Seth II at all, and we certainly can't grasp the we that he refers to, which is really, sorry? Okay. You can't grasp the we that he refers to, which is really a consciousness energy or energy gestalt personality or a multi-dimensional personality structure beyond our comprehension. They have no bodies, never did, no gender, nothing human at all. Quote, Seth II, you do not understand multi-dimensional personality structures. Seth II, there is consciousness with will and vitality that comes to you from beyond even those places that your Seth knows, end quote. And now, voila, Jane died, and Seth is now Seth II, the next Seth on the team, who has waited to step forward, or as if there was a next Seth, even if it wasn't Seth II. There's this group of Seths. Or Seth II is now some new alternate Seth, and it took 1 to 36 linear Earth years, for an ancient personality like Seth to suddenly evolve. And on top of that, he no longer cares about the integrity and authenticity of his material. Seth II. We sent Seth to you in your terms in some indescribably distant past. He entered your universe in a reality I find difficult to remember. He gave guidance to your kind for eons of your time. I do not sufficiently understand the experience in which you are presently involved in your terms. End quote. As I said, some have referred to all of these Seths as a family of Seths, like one of our Earth families, or a group of Seths, as Kevin, you introduced, whose members have apparently just waited for Jane to die before all of them could finally come forward to communicate with anyone who asks. Why would Jane have to die first? This family must have always been around, right? Or did it only start in 1963 when Jane first started with Seth? Or did it only start after Jane's death in 1984? In my opinion, overlooking the potential financial windfall of using Seth's name, there is also a narcissistic or myopic perspective existing with these alternate Seth folks or their followers that dictates to them that Seth operates on their linear needs and their linear time. But Seth too is an energy or multi-dimensional personality structure, so totally beyond our limited human understanding. Those folks don't realize this, proudly claim that their Seth is not Jane's Seth, but Seth II, or now I'll add, I said the family of Seth from the group of Seth. They so desperately hold on to a Seth or any Seth because each believe they so need a Seth, or for themselves, or financial reward, or both. In any case, when people claim, with all sincerity or not, that anyone in a dream or alternate state can contact an expanded or family member Seth just for the asking, they do not seem to realize that these are their subjective dream beliefs. Seth has become their symbol, seen as fact, because they won't, don't, or can't see their Seth as a symbol. I'm repeating this from the earlier session. Seth, in Seth class. Class member, Seth, would you help me in my dreams if I tried to contact you? Seth responds, you help yourself in your own dreams. You do not need me. You may use the symbol of me, but when you do, it is a symbol of your own inner knowledge. For I am the symbol of the knowledge that dwells within each of your psyches. I am myself, but beyond that, I am the symbol of the knowledge that dwells within each of your psyches. End quote. As I said, some use the phrase, we are Seth, to explain that there actually is some sort of Seth family, a Seth 2, 3, or 4, that you can always contact in your dreams or elsewhere just for the asking. As Seth II said, this we is a consciousness from beyond even those places that your Seth knows. Seth II added that you do not understand multidimensional personality structures. Yet, these folks have concocted this whole Seth family theory or alternate Seth theory or Seth group theory in order to have a Seth to hold on to. But all you need is yourself, as Seth said. You do not need me. You may use the symbol of me. So these folks need to create convoluted theories in order to grab an imaginary Seth to hold on to and bring back from their alternate or dream states in order to share with everyone when they are awake. They don't realize that they forsake their own self and transfer their own inner knowledge over to a symbolic Seth. They have wittingly or unwittingly fabricated a comic book fictionalized Seth. And I'm now going to give an expanded quote from the earlier one I gave about Clark Kent. Seth, people become frightened sometimes. They want to think that I spring automatically into your lives as Superman. They did not question Superman. Only a simple change of clothing was required for our hero, Mr. Kent. They do not want Rupert's inquiring mind to intrude. What comic book reader wants to bother with a Clark Kent? Or worse, wants Clark Kent to shout out from the phone booth or wherever, you can do your version of this too, because we all have a reality in which we are Clark Kent and Superman at one and the same time. Such people simply want Superman to perform his miracles. They want to keep Clark Kent and Superman entirely separate on a mental, psychical, and physical basis. And only in terms of our analogy, I become a super soul rather than Superman. They do not want my authority questioned. They think that if they had their own super soul, they would have far better sense than Rupert, and they would use me as if I were a magic genie. They are afraid Rupert might question me out of existence, for they do not understand that Rupert's questions and yours, Rob's, your sense of integrity, are partially responsible for a Superman rather than a super mouse. End quote. In other words, people want their own Superman, Super Soul, or Seth without bothering with Clark Kent or Jane. As they never question Superman, they now will never question their own Seth, but rather just receive his miracles free from Jane. Like they want, like Clark Kent, like Superman would be free from Clark Kent. They would use Seth without Jane's questioning Seth out of existence. They don't understand that it is Rob's and Jane's questioning and integrity that made Seth a Superman or super soul, giving great material. Without that, Seth would have been a super mouse with weak, watered down, poorly written material, just like the unquestioned new alternative and fake Seths now provide after Jane's death. And they have also myopically imagined a mundane family of We Are Seth, made up of Seth relatives, while the actual We Are Seth is beyond human understanding. Seth II. We are Seth, and we speak to those portions of your being who have not known physical lives, or rather, we speak for those portions of your being who have not known physical lives. For each of you have counterparts who are aliens to physical reality. Translations are difficult. Your emotions grow like flowers from your being, alien to us. We marvel and water your flesh. Seth II. We are the voices who speak without tongues of our own. We are sources of that energy from which you come. We seeded your universe. We have never known physical existence. Our joy created the exaltation from which your world comes. Verbal symbols have no meaning for us. Our experience is not translatable. We perceive your thoughts as lights. It is nearly impossible for us to explain our reality. We only know only that we exist. We send immeasurable vitality to you. You are never alone. End quote. So, I'm sorry, but nothing these folks say about Seth II or We Are Seth makes any sense outside of being their own symbols, used to objectify Seth II as just another Seth, so that Seth is still around to learn from or cash in on. And we are not alone on our own, because we still have Seth. I'll let Seth have the final word in closing, and this is from up above. Seth, these people distrust themselves. They use my position as a substitute for the authority they are trying to give up. They think if I had a Seth, I too would progress, and so forth. End quote. End of the presentation. Thank you very much to thousands of people in the chairs of the auditorium. Okay, so that's that. I'm done with the presentation in words, but I am open to any questions, even though I can't see you. But let me see if I can make you bigger on my screen. Yeah, I'm going to make you at least. Okay, now I could see a big black screen with a little gray circle of you, and I see a little picture of me in the corner, and I forgot I was even there. No, hi. Hi, Barrie. Okay.
One thing I will say, Barrie, thank you for everything that you've shared there. That is fantastic. That's great what you've done there, right? I just want to go over what you've said earlier on as well. When,
everything.
Yeah. There's a lot to go over, but obviously I know time is but we're a little bit restricted with carrying on here. But
I'm not. You could break this up 5 hours into different shows. I'm ready to go on for as long as you want, or do it a second time around. So we're limited by time in which we're going to grow old and die, and and think batteries run out, whatever. But in other words, we're here. So
Well,
continue any way you want.
I'm sure we'll get you on again, Barrie. I think, in Seth Speaks, I think it was volume 1. There's so many quotes in there that I've looked at. There's so many times, and you've already answered this, but there's so many times when Seth will say, he will use the word we. We do not use permanent structures. We do not think of space as you do. We're aware of the inner laws that govern all materializations. There's just so many.
Right. I read them all.
Even Seth talks about having a teacher himself as well.
Well, all I could tell you is that what you were describing of what they did, that is Seth II. That is this being, what he called multidimensional, whatever, that taught us how to create the physical universe. They gave our cells inside our body or everything, the knowledge and whatever they need to exist and develop. That, I would say, and Seth, if he had a teacher, would be his connection to Seth too. Because they did say in here that Seth, we sent Seth. So you could show me if you want, we could discuss, instead of using memory, what Seth said about that. But any teacher that Seth had would have nothing at all to do with what Seth said about not wanting to compromise his material, about wanting the material to have its integrity and authenticity by only coming through Jane, by not wanting to increase distortion. If Seth had a teacher or 10,000 teachers, that doesn't impact on anything Seth said about his material through Jane. That's it. Unless you want to add,
okay.
Unless you want me to say more.
So no. So any time that like for example, chapter 3, my work and those dimensions of reality. For example, page 32 of Seth Speaks. Again, just everywhere. We are beginning to learn that we're beginning to learn the creative joy of play. We enjoy a sense of play that is highly spontaneous. We are also certainly just the word we. I'm not getting, I'm reading out of context here. It's just
any we is not like we're going to have lunch today, or we're great. I love my family. We're a great group of people. Seth is also a multidimensional being. He's not, and he's a part of Seth too. He's not, the we is not we. Like there's, again, let's just use the Seth A and Seth B and Seth C to take the numbers away. All these different Seths, they're not, there's no evidence for them. There's no reason for them to wait until after Jane died. There's no reason they wouldn't be there before Jane. There's just no evidence. It's just somebody's theory because they believe Seth is talking to them, or automatic writing or whatever, without question on their say-so. They believe it's Seth. Therefore, this we must mean that there's a whole bunch of Seths that are not Seth, but just different. It doesn't make any sense. The example I gave with you, Kevin, if they said, there are 20 Kevins out there posting in your name and doing everything, and they started to say, oh, Kevin no longer cares. There's a lot of Kevins. I'm tuning into another Kevin. That's in the group of Kevins in his mind and in his group of different probable Kevins. It wouldn't mean that you still wouldn't want your material seen as your material. You know what I mean? As one person, it's a theory that holds true. It's like identity theft. So all of these things have nothing to do with what Jane, all the first part of this, what Jane and Seth and Rob also said about he will only come through Jane in order to maintain the integrity and authenticity of the material and avoid great distortions. Nothing contradicts that. And it's not a complicated theory. Well, is a ghost physical, or maybe they appear at night and they appear as the soul in the ghost? This is just everyday common sense.
Okay. Okay. No, I get it. I get it.
You can see I get worked up about this.
It's all good.
Proudly so.
Yeah. Well, and also one thing we never touched on as well, which let's just quickly touch on as well, is your book. So just tell us briefly about the book. It came out in May, and what can people expect from that book?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
tell us what it's about, just very briefly.
Thank you. Okay. The book, whose title I never remember because it's a long, I'm looking over here because I'm getting the book. It's called Seth Material Q&A, The Spiritual Inner Journey of Self-Awareness, Original Seth Class Member Answers Your Questions. Okay, that's the name of the book. What it is over the years, I have been on, online. I've been the most active Seth person online who's been to Seth class. I must have done 10,000 answers over a decade or more, but more than a decade. But in any case, I compiled the answers I was giving people. People were always asking me a lot of questions. So I kept their question and I kept my answer. And then I wanted to do it for a long time. Whoops, I just lost you again. But I get it. No, you're here. I finally decided to do it and put it together. And I use a little larger font because I didn't want. I don't know. I have a thing about if my vision's okay, but sometimes font's small for people. It's not a huge font, but in any case, and it would have been very long anyway. It's about 500 pages long. It's a long. I didn't want to break it up into a part 1 and a part 2, which I easily could have done. I just wanted it all out there, and the whole second half of it is something we could also talk about, but in another show. My idea of the secret, that the secret, the popularly known secret, is really only half the secret, and the half that everybody knows is that you create your own reality via your thoughts. The law of attraction is involved. Blah blah. The second half of the secret that's found in the Seth material, but it makes sense, and I always thought, is that when you create your own reality, you're to do so including helping and not harming others. That the two of those together is the secret, and that's what you need to learn to move on to the next dimension and leave being a human being, the reincarnational cycle behind.
Well, that's interesting. So if you're doing something that's helping and not harming others, then you really got a chance to start manifesting something. But how?
Well, no. Let me interrupt that. I want to interrupt that because if it's not that you always have to. It says that when you can include it, then you do it. You don't. And helping anybody doesn't mean, becoming a self Buddhist or becoming some kind of person that gives up the wealth or gives up anything you have. It just means including helping others and not harming. If you're a millionaire or a billionaire, don't destroy the environment. If you have enough money, and in that case you would, give something to help people. If you don't have enough money, don't. The key here is you're not obligated to help others. It's not a responsibility to help others. But if you're in touch with yourself, if you're in touch with your authentic self, by nature, because our nature is loving, compassionate, and good, by being in touch with your very nature, you will enjoy helping others. You will want to. You're not obligated to. It would be something you'd find joy in. But if you felt obligated or responsible, you could then build a resentment. You could then say, I don't want to help them. They don't deserve help. You get mad at the people you feel you have to help. And so that's part of it. And so it's not like everything you do has to help others and not harm others. But you see somebody in the supermarket and they can't reach the top thing. You reach it for them and you give it to them and say thank you, and you'll feel great for the rest of the day. You smile to someone. You be nice. It's like that book about everything I learned in kindergarten. You just be nice. Be kind.
Not always easy. Do
what you can.
And sometimes we fail.
Great. Fail. Be happy. Be proud. Understand. Explore yourself and figure out maybe why you failed or how when you're ready to. But, you be gentle with yourself and kind to yourself as you should do with others. But you don't fake it. You don't do a fake kindness. You just if you could be yourself, you will eventually accomplish all these things over this lifetime or a number of lifetimes. And that would be the second part of the secret. You don't just like model abundance. Like I've heard the first secret, oh, you could buy a car and buy a house and you're modeling abundance for others. So they'll see you in your car and you're modeling what they could have. That's, maybe you will model it, but that's not the secret. The secret is you can have, abundance, but you should not harm and hurt other people as well.
Okay.
You tell me, and maybe I'm wrong. I haven't seen that in the secret.
No. I think that's great. I think that's great advice. And again, this book is full of some very wise and great stuff. And we will get you back on, Barrie. We will do. We're just out of time right now. I just want to, just as a last sort of closing question, Barrie, just the most important message of what do you think we've talked about today? What do you think is most important, if there was one?
There is one. The most important, besides the secret thing, and because that's how you could leave reincarnation behind, the whole cycle. The most important thing about what the theme of what we're talking about is that Seth said he would only communicate via Jane in order to maintain the integrity and authenticity of the material and to avoid great distortion. He would not risk it to distort through people if he could. He also said how important Rob was, that it was Rob and Jane together that allowed him to come through and come through so clearly. So that these people, if you hear somebody claiming, swearing, sincerely believing that it's Seth, and it's all on their say-so, you can't believe them. Don't believe them. They may believe it, but they're using Seth as a symbol. Or else everything Seth said was a lie or not true, which makes no sense. So I guess that would be it. I'm not saying that you should distrust these other Seths. As human beings, I have some personal doubts about some, but that's really doesn't matter at all. You should use your own sense when you deal with people, when you believe these people. But when it comes to believing that it's Seth because they say so, remember that Jane and Seth and Rob for years experimented and tested Seth. They didn't take Seth at his say so. And all these people say it's Seth because I said so, because I was sitting in a chair and it came to me, because anything they come up with, it's subjective. There's no evidence. There's no proof. There's no other Seths before Jane. It makes no sense on any level. So that would be, I know I went on, but that would be the main thing to get out of it. These other people, if they are sincere, they're still mistaken. That was it.
Well, Barrie, just before you go there, you've got a website, you've got a Facebook page, so we're going to link your Facebook page in the description below. It's coming up on the screen right now. And Barrie, I just want to say, until next time, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you.
Okay, and I want to add, anybody could write me about this or anything they want at bargell@aol.com, BARGELL @AOL.com. Any comments or questions, please feel free.
Okay.
And I'll also try to respond to the comments on YouTube when this comes out.
Excellent. Well, Barrie, thank you so much.
Okie doke. So have a good evening or day or night.